Hello, my name is Rebecca Bruner, and I'm a board member here at the Museum on Main. And we are talking with Brian and Chris Bourg and Linda Garbino. And what we're talking about today is about the Pleasanton Historic Association and how it got started. Because it's an amazing thing that what you people have done.
It's actually Pleasanton Heritage Association.
Heritage Association, that's right.
Easy to confuse.
We talked,
PHA.
that's
Easy
right.
to confuse.
We talked about many possible titles,
Right.
and it was a group effort. How we got started, basically, we all own very old houses. And when I say old, I mean in late 1800s, for the most part, mid to late 1800s. And we noticed that throughout the city, a lot of the older homes were being demolished or so changed that nothing remained of the original look of the house. It was changing the nature of the look of the city. And just about at the same time, a new assistant director actually came in, and director of community services, Brian Dolan, came in to later on in the era after we sort of got started. So he kind of helped with the process of moving forward with the types of things you need to do to get your city into a proper frame of mind to look at and take care of your historic property and get it properly registered. So the group, there were about 5 or 6 families that all had these older homes, and we thought we're going to get together and see what we can do about putting some protections on them. And Brian Swift, who had been recently, I think it had been as the city manager, and also worked with the planning department quite a bit, also had done a lot to, on his own, and I think through the department, to maintain a lot of the, the architecture within the city. But there really wasn't anything written or in our municipal code or in any kind of guidelines or language of the city that one could say, here's where it's written, and this is the process you go through if you want to do something to alter your house. And so that was kind of our goal at that point. So we were involved with Bonnie and Fred Krischbaum and Art and Toonie Dunkley. Mainly Art worked with it because, being a developer, he was very keen on this and had some old property as well and a historic home. And so, and there were a number of other people that connected with us that had homes, and they also saw things changing rapidly on their streets. So this is the goal, and we kind of met with Nelson Fiala, who was the city manager at the time, to find out what the process is, what do we need to do. And Nelson, that's kind of how it all started.
So when did this start?
This was like about, I would say, 2006, 2007, where we were really interested in trying to do something formal.
And when did you move into your home?
We moved, oh my gosh, we moved into in the late 80s, about 18, no, not 18. I'm just kidding. No, I was about 1988 where we moved into that.
And we were 1974. 1974.
49 years this year.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
and this was our second historic home in the city, so.
Why did you get involved? What did you see happening?
We were afraid that we would lose too many of the historic homes without protection, and that we needed protection right away as soon as that we could get it. And
Because you saw homes changing?
people came to think that it was a great idea to live downtown because they're within walking distance of restaurants and whatever. But they wanted to change the houses, and in some cases, they, as Linda referred to, they demolished them and built a modern house that may have been too big for the lot and certainly didn't fit architecturally with anything that had been built in the city. So I think that was the urgency once we saw several mistakes.
And this is actually still going on.
Yeah.
People want to live downtown now. They're tired of Ruby Hill or wherever they're living, and in Castlewood or whatever, and they want to move to an historic home, but either it's not big enough or the inside is not. I don't have a 500 square foot great room here. I'm going to change this all out. I'm going to knock a wall out here. I'm going to alter the house and do what I want to do. And it's my right as a property owner to do what I want to do. However, our contention is you don't have the right to ruin historic buildings because that's part of Pleasanton's charm. That's what makes us unique, is that we have these neighborhoods where all of these beautiful properties exist, and taking care of them should be something we cherish and that we want to make part of our national or citywide character.
Our legacy.
Well, plus we looked at what other cities were doing. We
Right.
looked at Livermore and met with the Livermore folks in the city. They had a much greater inventory of historic homes, but they had established some protections, and so they shared their documents and information and the process that they went through. But they did it internally. They took the bull by the horns internally and decided that they needed to do this. And so that, that was
The city itself.
the city itself did, yes.
And they had a board that looked at any plan to change one of the historic houses. Now, just to
Historic Review Board.
to comment on what Brian said, it's never been our goal to tell people they couldn't do anything with the interior of these homes. It's nice when they do, because we have maintained that. Only the outside. And homes that, there were homes that people changed the windows and the doors and the placement of the windows and doors on, and that is enough to actually change the historic integrity of a home. But people at first, one of the things that we heard was, well, we want to do whatever we want to our houses. And we said, well, yes, inside you can, but outside is what people see. And that's the historic part.
So we were able to have the city agree to preserve the first 10 feet. So,
The first
10
feet of
10 feet from the front of the house, the
Okay.
existing structure, has to maintain the way it was essentially built in the historic period.
But that came as a result, that kind of came down the line after we were given the clear indication by Nelson that we needed to become a nonprofit, and in order to have some say or some credibility, and we understood that. A couple of our people who are on our board wrote articles for historic magazines they're paint experts, window and door experts. You just learn a lot when you have a home that old, that there are things that you need to know and you need to educate yourself. So we went through the process. One of our board members was an attorney, and we went through the process of working with her to develop our nonprofit status, and we did get our 501c3. So we've had that since 2008, and so we've moved forward with that. And that the city, whenever they got plans that came in, or mainly through developers or sometimes through homeowners who wanted to add on to their house or do something, that they'd share the plans with us, and we had an advisory role, and we would give our input, and that was pretty much the way it worked, until we decided at some point that there needed to be something more formalized and put in writing, so that as staff people moved on to other positions or retired, as we left the process, something needed to be in writing, and it needed to be a practice that was followed, and people knew where to look for it and what the information was. And so that was pretty much secured by the formulation of the Historic Preservation Committee, and that's when Brian Dolan came in. And Brian had worked in two other cities, Vallejo and Palo Alto, that had both gone through these processes. And so he actually started with a context statement, which is, what is your city about? What's the history of your city? Who used to live here? Who developed it? And so that was done by, he brought in a group that he had worked with before, and they developed that, did an excellent job on that. And then the next step really was to look at developing some sort of a guidelines or rules of the road. And so that's when a committee was formed to do that. It was set up by the city council. And so Bonnie Krischbaum was one of the founding members of PHA, and so she and I were invited to sit on that committee, and we sat there with probably 4 or 5 developers. And so we were able then to integrate with the process of this is what we want to do, these are the types of things we want to see within the city. And it really turned out that many of the people that we worked with understood and wanted to do the same things. In fact, quite ironically, all of them bought historic homes in the city. So it's an interesting process, and we've since recognized them as part of our awards process and everything. So it took some time to develop a relationship and
to choose a date.
Yeah.
To start, because we wanted to get as many as possible
saved.
And yes, and one of the people who was quite adamant about the date said nothing nice was built after 1942. Well, we disagreed, but in order to get the ball rolling and to get the city's approval to start, we agreed to that. But then every 10 years, you would look at the next 10 years.
Okay.
Right. So
that's a California preservation process that they go through. Yeah.
We're actually overdue for that.
So California had a process that you could somewhat follow, and then you got some directions from some other cities. What about, were people in Pleasanton excited about this? Was there pushback?
Only a few people objected to it, but nobody really said we don't want our house to be included in this. Ultimately, the city hired a Catherine Petrin, who was from San Francisco, right? And she has
Architectural Resources Group.
Yes,
and she and
consulting
her colleague went around the city and identified homes that were pre-1942, and they did a lot of research.
They had actually developed the context statement, so they had a pretty good idea about the lay of the land and the history.
Okay. Right, and which ones were still in good shape and would qualify. So eventually we developed a list, they developed a list of 92 homes that were built before 1942 that still retained enough of their historic integrity to make the list of our resources. So that's what the houses now are called.
So 92 homes.
Right. And then one that was left off the list was the Century House.
That's right, Century House. And mainly what they wanted to do with the city wanted to narrow the parameters, so it was mainly in the downtown area, which would be covered by the boundaries, natural boundaries like the arroyo and certain streets and, areas that was confined to what you'd consider the historic downtown. So once we went through that whole process and had this approved, and the city hired the Architectural Resource Group to come in and do the formal survey, then a document was developed, and it was actually, there's a CD as well as a very thick document, very thoroughly done, very, very well done. And I think the thing that was useful about that is people then realized, who got copies of these, and we made sure a lot of the realtors got them and understood what the process was and what we were about. We're really about education, preservation, and recognition. Those are the 3 key things that we like to do. We're not about getting anybody's face and telling them what to do. That's not our role. So I think, the important part of it was it takes time, and for people to understand, we're not telling you what you can do to your house. We're just saying there's things you need to understand when you come into an historic city and you buy an historic home, that you should know this. You should know this ahead of time. You should know what the limitations are. And so actually many of the homes that we've seen since 2008, and since this kind of came about, families, there's been turnover in those homes, other people have bought them. Some families have added on to the back of the home, and then they've worked with our local architects and have done I think are really a good job. Sometimes a little disconcerting to see a house double or triple in size, and sometimes when there's questions about whether that is going to work or not, we just say go back to the architectural review group and see if they feel it's going to change the status of the house as an historic resource. They're the ones who are going to make that decision, and that always seemed to settle any controversy.
So it wasn't in your hands?
No, no.
Which was,
No.
yeah. So the city worked well with you,
Yes.
which is wonderful. What about lots? Because I do know that there are some lots that were in the middle of older homes, and yet someone built kind of a modern-looking house on them. Does this have anything to do with lots?
Well, there were 4 architectural styles established in these neighborhoods, these downtown neighborhoods. We
Okay.
wanted to call them historic neighborhoods. Brian Dolan at that point was not wanting to do that.
You're speaking of historic district, which
I'm
has a
sorry,
legal
historic-
classification.
Historic district, yes.
District has a unique legal classification in that language.
Okay.
So anything built or remodeled would have to match these, and they were the recognized, like the Spanish architecture, the Victorian,
Prairie style.
and then
And-
vernacular.
Yeah, which is just a basic house that doesn't have anything ostentatious about it, but it has, it's dated in its age and has a quality that people appreciate.
Or also craftsman style was another one.
Right.
And I think that included lots.
Yeah.
That were in the
Right.
historic neighborhoods.
Okay, so there is some control over those
Yes.
lots as well.
I think for the most part, a lot of people who decided that they want to buy a lot, or it's usually a developer, that concern came much later because the city had the information to give them. So they would take their plans and they would ask beforehand, and there were 3 really solid architects in the town who understood historic property and understood how to address and help folks make that decision. And quite ironically, people move here because they love the historic property and they love the downtown quality, the uniqueness of it. I think we feel sometimes like we're in this protective bubble, but we do have a lovely downtown. And so maintaining that to the best of our ability, is going to be our goal, and we're gone. Hopefully the goal of those who take our places in the future.
Yeah, and the homes add to that charm of the downtown.
Absolutely.
Because they're around that area.
Right.
And we see so many communities like Dublin and San Ramon with very little left of their heritage.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they move. One of the practices used to be, yes, we will. We can remodel your house. We just have to leave one wall from the original house, and that was like could be anywhere in the house. It was like, a little absurd, but that was a practice for a while. And so I think that a lot of the builders, developers, interacted with us when they wanted to build something on empty property, and they would say, we've got these plans, you guys come and look at these and see what you think. And so we saw that process occur with some of the desire to build condos down closer to the downtown area. And so for the most part, we were able to give some input and some ideas, and hopefully they like those. And then a couple of folks that used to be developers took the old Sears plans, and from Sears Roebuck catalog, you used to be able to get house plans, and built one. We have a wonderful one over on Peters.
Abel Oxen has one, yes.
Emil
Right.
and his wife.
And we gave them an
Marjorie.
award,
Yeah.
even though it wasn't a historic time period home, but it was designed and built like a 1921 Sears catalog home, and it's beautiful inside and out.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's
yes,
stunning.
they did a wonderful job.
So they have an award plaque on their home that we
Yeah,
installed
yeah.
there.
So tell me about these awards. Who started that idea, and how many awards have you given out? And
I don't remember who started it, but
I think we came to the decision that we wanted to let people we wanted to advertise the fact that these were historic homes in the city. So we came up with the idea to produce bronze plaques, bronze plaques with the date that the house was built.
And Pleasanton Heritage Association logo and his Historic Preservation Award on it. So
And we'd seen these in other cities. So we began to do that, and in order to afford them, we had annual yard sales. And the Christbaums were the ones that had most of them. And we would put together that money, and one year we'd maybe order 4 plaques or 3, depending on how much money we had.
when we first started, it was even 1 or 2.
Yeah, so it was, we worked with the city to see if they were interested, met with the mayor and city manager again to see if you're interested in this process and joining us with this and making a joint program. That's what Danville did. So if you go along some of the areas in Danville, you will see plaques, and they are numbered, the houses in terms of, and the Danville city, put those together. In fact, we had a person on our board who worked doing that whole historic thing for Danville. So it was good. We had people who had skills and knowledge and knew what was done in other cities and could help us make decisions. So that was part of it too, in doing the permanent plaques on the exterior. And Brian, who's chair of our awards committee, and we have 2 other people, John Ribovich also, and then Eric Edgar is on that committee as well, who's very knowledgeable about historic buildings within the city. So that they actually install them on the house. They go in and, and people are happy to do that and to have us help them with that process. And we give the local Crown Trophy gets our business, and they're the ones that develop the plaques for us, and they keep saying, we keep seeing more of our plaques all around the city, and we said, that's good, that's the whole point. And
so
you're really honoring the homeowner for having a historic home, and that makes it really nice.
It is,
and keeping
it's really nice.
And
yes.
they're pleased
pride.
about that.
Yeah.
They take pride in that because they.
I'm sorry, Chris,
That's all right. Eventually, when we worked with the Jean Jones estate, she had mentioned us in her will, and she mentioned, of course, the museum. And so she ended up leaving her property to the city, and the city said, we have to turn it over to the museum and let the museum be in charge of it. So neighbors up there did not want the house to become a museum, so it was eventually sold, and it went through the process where actually they had more control over what was done to that house than we have control over what's done with the resources now. So
They being the city.
the city.
the planning department made sure that they did a really good job. So her house looks
It looks
remarkable.
wonderful.
They even redid the barn way in the
Yes.
back, which was canted a bit, and they rebuilt it that way.
Yeah.
So the museum, then did we ask the museum?
What we had done, I know that Rebecca is planning to do another whole piece on the Jean Jones property.
Yes, and how all that came together.
Right, because we're in this gallery that's named after her and her family, and I'm sitting here right now looking at some of her belongings and the family's belongings. So I think the thing that's wonderful about that whole process was that we were able to work together with the city and Peter McDonald being a land use attorney, that's his expertise, and coming together with PHA. We had worked with him on a couple of other projects, and so he said, Chris, why don't you come and be a part of this too, because you knew Jean, and so we went through the whole process with her will. She had originally wanted to leave the house to PHA, and we said, no, I think that's too big of responsibility for us at this point to take that on, but you might consider, looking at the museum. And so that's basically what occurred, as you know, and we can, at some other time go into more detail. But what that allowed us to do is that we wrote a grant and submitted that to the committee that Peter and Chris and Michael, I'm trying to think his name, from who did the architectural review from San Francisco. And anyway, the point being is that they agreed that we would get, as PEHA, we'd get $5,000 a year that would come from the endowment. And it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but for us, you know, we accrue money in other ways as well, and it gave us the opportunity to be able to do, you know, 4 or 5 of these plaques every year and go through this wonderful opportunity to honor people here in the museum and a reception and profile, which gets back to one of your original questions, is just to profile how you get the word out to the community about what the work is of the Heritage Association and why we're doing it and why it's important. And I think now we're getting phone calls from people who want plaques for their houses. And so we've kind of come full circle, which is good. And so that, you know, it's been a very, I think, a very successful process, and one that I think, because it was a grassroots group, that it had some more authenticity to it, unless versus being layered on by the city or another authority.
And as soon as we finish the 92 resources, we've done maybe
34, 35.
35. We will then look at houses that aren't considered resources, but could have been had certain changes not been made. So.
One would be increasing, or moving the date up.
Right.
So from 1942 to Pleasanton has a number of really, I call them iconic ranch style homes that are from vintage 1946 to 1956 maybe.
Okay.
And they've got that classic front where you've got the garage on the side usually that looks like it's part of the house, and then you've got the low one-story with brick underneath, and they were all built in that period, and there are some that are just really still in beautiful, beautiful condition, and there aren't that many of them really.
Well, Catherine told Brian and Chris when she finished she and her Emily Stiles, who was her partner on this survey endeavor, she said, "You got a lot more houses out there that would qualify." So that's why when she finished the survey and turned it into the city, it's called a limited survey, because the practice of the federal government and the states with regard to historic property is they every 10 years they review another massive property to see what will qualify, so we don't lose track of it as time goes by.
Yeah.
And we need to save those as well.
Yeah.
Right, and we don't think of those right now as being historic, but they are, yes.
And you don't think
Especially as time goes
Pleasanton
by.
Valley houses as being historic, but someday they will be considered resources.
yeah.
So,
Because our big, buildup was in the late 60s, 70s,
Right.
through that time.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So how do you do this honor, the recognition? What do you do with that? How do you decide who gets
we
the honor?
we discuss it at our board meeting.
Okay.
And we'll throw out houses, throw out the
And
locations, and then Brian and his group, Eric and John.
On the awards committee,
Right.
there's 3 of us now. We get together and say, how about we, get some more houses for this year. We need some award, plaques to present, and so we will kick around ideas and maybe even drive around and look at places and talk about them, and so far we're pretty much sticking to houses that are classified in the resource report as resources. However, there are some exceptions. There's the one that I mentioned, the Sears Catalog House is not considered an historic resource.
Yes.
But it's certainly deserving for its unique qualities. There was also a farmhouse out at the end of Rose Avenue, adjacent to the fairgrounds, that was slated for demolition.
Yes.
Until someone came along and said, "Hey, I'll buy this place and fix it up. And they did a remarkable job. And we honored that house with an award plaque. There's another one on Stanley Boulevard that was the old home in front of the developed, where there was a trailer park right there, and a developer bought the property and put in condos, and
Actually, they're single-family homes.
there are single family. They are single family
But they
homes.
saved the home up front.
But they saved the home in front, and it came. In fact, it went before the city council, and there were council members even that were saying it's not worth saving, but it is worth saving, and they did, and we honored that one too. So there are those exceptions that are not in the historic resource report that could have been, and we have honored them if they were preserved.
So once they select a handful, we turn it over to our membership, and then they vote.
They vote on.
We put together a ballot, and or actually we send it out on an email with the photos of the homes and the addresses in case they want to drive by and look at it, and then the membership chooses. We maybe will have eight or so homes for the membership to choose 4 or 5. And lately with the Gene Jones Award, the endowment, addition to what we can spend, we were able to give 5 this year, and I think 5 last year.
Wonderful.
Because the cost has risen to about $650 per plaque.
Oh.
So it's a substantial amount of money. So,
Yes.
so 5 plaques is, nearly $4,000.
And then we have Gary Winter, the local artist who actually moved to Nevada now, right?
Yeah, he's been in 2 different places with his family, but he stays in close touch with us.
And he'll create a watercolor rendering of the winners, and then one of his little wooden houses, and then everyone gets that in addition to the house.
And those little houses are wonderful.
Oh, they are. They
They're
are
wonderful.
That's another asset that we have within Pleasanton that is so unique.
Yes.
That we and the museum has been wonderful in procuring those and selling them. Has become very popular with the 100th anniversary of Amador High School. Gary's made up the original Amador High School miniature, and so I'm sure those will sell out pretty fast. But
Oh, yeah.
So we're in close touch with him, and he follows what we do, and we always ask for permission when we go put the plaques up. We ask for permission to take photos and to put them on Facebook and our Facebook page and website, because we always want to get permission to do that, and people enjoy it. So we just recently posted all of those pictures, and we're going around putting the plaques up from this year. So,
Well, it's really an honor. It's really an honor for those homeowners to have that.
it is.
Now, what if a home is in bad shape? And, has that gotten to be an issue? You kind of mentioned the house at the, beginning of that development was kind of in bad shape, and
Well, this is one of our goals, and we've got a couple of developers who want to work with us on this because they own historic property and they're realizing the benefit of what has been in place for a long time called the Mills Act. And the Mills Act will allow, a very brief description of it, allow you to reduce your overall tax bill by establishing a contract with the city. And this is what we're going to do as a homeowner, and this is how much we're going to spend. And so you have that contract. So that's a relationship that's established, and that can go on for at least 10 years. So if you sell the house, that contract goes with it, and it's an incentive for the buyer to have reduced property taxes, and as they come in, as you well know. So this is a piece we want to get in place to address your question for people who own homes who don't have the resources to put into major remodel, but you see the house in dire need of assistance. So that's one way. Plus, the city was not opposed to it. I know when Nelson Fiala was here, he wanted to have a type of a I'm going to call it a scholarship or grant program to allow people to procure a certain amount of money, and that, you know, there would be a plot of money that the council would look at that, and never really went anywhere. But it was a good idea. But I think that we really should go and look a little bit more seriously at the Mills Act with the city, because it's in place. It's got its own set of guidelines. You know, the rules of the road are pretty much there. So that's one way that we think people who have a hard time, you know, pulling money together, and even people who are taking good care of their house. We had a neighbor of Chris and Brian's come to us and say, hey, you know, they're about to retire, and they're concerned about being able to continue to afford their taxes, and to maintain their historic home. So the Mills Act would be a wonderful opportunity.
So, if I'm hearing correctly, Jean Jones, her house was in disrepair.
Yes.
She was an older person
Yes.
and couldn't physically take care of it, and was also, like we said, older. And so if we had a Mills Act, she could have maybe applied to
Yes.
get some money
Yes.
to keep her house up. and
So what
such.
she would have been able to do is say, okay, I need my house painted, and this is going to cost me, you know, $10,000, you know, to have my house painted. And so over a period of time, her property taxes could be reduced accordingly in order for her to be able to afford to have someone paint the house and to do what, I mean, we all put out an extreme amount of money when you stop and think about it to maintain a house. Everyone does. It's not something that other people don't do, but it just seems that, you know, milling wood and getting things, you know, molding and certain kinds of things that replace what you have or correct what you have to make it look authentic. And, you know, it's costly. It can be very costly. So that's a good program, and we hope to get it in.
Okay, so that's something that you're working on now?
Yes.
That's the next big project.
Okay. So you also mentioned education. What do you do to educate people? Do you have any set programs?
Well, we had a brochure that we wanted the city to be able to distribute, and they felt that since they didn't have control over the contents of it, that we would have to distribute it ourselves. So a lot of people contact us. We do periodically, we do newsletters just to let them know what's happening. We're working with the city right now on the Century House project, which is even though it's out of the parameters of the historic district as established by the city, it's still in need. It was a gift to the city. It was used quite frequently when it was in good repair. And that to me would be, and that's kind of a candidate for Mills Act, but the city has, you know, they know it's a much more expensive process because they've let it go into disrepair for too long. So, long story short on that one, another educational process is people asking about types of paint, types of, when we have our events here, occasionally we will invite somebody who, like a roofer or somebody that we know our members have used and have liked their work. There's a company called Wood Windows Warehouse that's in Emeryville. They do authentic reproductions of they can do any kind of window or door and fashion it for you. It looks exactly the same as what you had. And so that is a way where people come here for those events. They get the information, they see the product. So that's another type of education.
Yeah.
So,
And we have our website.
yes.
And so you've got all these great resources that collectively people have used, and that's
Yes.
been very helpful.
It has been, yeah.
Yeah.
And a couple, as I mentioned, John Ribovich has written for some of the magazines that are, you know, very recognized for historic resources and information. And he has done a lot of research on that, and he's, you know, looked to as an authority for, you know, paint and combinations, in fact.
Windows,
and
doors.
windows and all that, yeah. So he's he's a wonderful resource. And with Eric Edgar, who's an historian in his own right, has done some wonderful things and has really been useful for our organization, and is getting us to think about other types of ways of educating too that we can do on our Facebook page.
Also, when we put out press releases to the local papers,
Yes.
we have the information about the homes and who's getting an award this year and photos of the homes, and that helps, educate the community about what's going on here and what PHA is all about. And people, started, contacting us and saying, "Oh, wow, this, can we have an older home too, or can we, are we eligible for a plaque?" And so we always tell them, to check the historic resource report and see if you're located in there and what status you have,
Or we'll check it for them.
or we can, or we will do that for them. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that we're involved with just to make it more visible to the community, and hoping people appreciate what they have and what Pleasanton has, because all of us moved here because of that.
Right, right. Well, I know that you have worked with the museum before in doing some historic home tours, and how popular they were, because people love to see the old homes. They do, and what you've done with them and all that, and I hope that that's helped your cause as well. It's
And
so
I taught
important.
third grade.
Yes.
So third grade is the year you learn about Pleasanton history.
Yes.
So I would take my students through we'd walk from our school downtown, we'd visit the museum, and then we'd look at the houses, and then since I was lucky enough to have one, the kids could come through our house to see that it had, they found out what a basement was, what an attic was, and so there were other teachers whose kids were able to do that.
Don't forget the pole chain on the toilet.
Yeah.
Oh, you have a pull chain.
Oh, yeah.
Full chain toilet, and the phone that has the separate microphone, the box phone.
Mouthpiece and, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yes.
then we have several iterations of typewriters, and going up to computers and telephones.
What a great experience for
Oh.
children, because,
Yeah.
yes, living out here in California, we typically don't have basements.
Yeah.
And we typically don't have attics.
Right.
And, and then you've got some of those neat, things from the past, the old phones, some people have the old stoves, they've got all that things that, it's very interesting for children to see and to.
I saw a great cartoon that sort of speaks to exactly what we're talking about. It's a group of teenagers with their iPhones taking pictures of a telephone kiosk that we used to have all over, that we don't have. And they, the caption was basically, students learning about the history of communication, I mean, it's...
It doesn't seem that long ago to us, but to them it was
This
ancient history.
It is, what is that thing,
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Yeah.
And what would we do without our cell phones?
Right.
Right. Well, it's a great thing that you've started here, and that you've had ongoing for a number of years. And so hopefully it will continue on. And since we've got the city bought into it, and the neighborhoods bought into it, and I know 2nd Street, and I think partly because of the historic nature of the homes, it gets to be a big Halloween thing.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
And they love to see the different homes, because, so some of our neighborhoods, it's, sometimes hard to tell the homes apart because they all kind of look the same, except, they might be painted differently. And so it's fun to see those mixed, designs in
is,
a
yeah.
neighborhood.
And they know which houses give the best candy.
Do they? Oh.
Yes. We get over 2,000 trick-or-treaters
On 2nd Street.
on 2nd Street.
Yes.
And we've even had people from 3rd Street come down and argue with homeowners, saying, well, why do you take all the trick-or-treaters? And we say, you can have them. We don't particularly, want them all, but they don't want to walk up the hill
Well, I live on Angela and Mirador, and I have the same complaint about you guys. No, but I see people in the neighborhood walking down the hill, and then I kind of flag them down and say, "Stop here now," or on the way back.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Because I do like to see the kids, but it's just so much fun down there because there's parents and there's kids all over. The city has really gotten involved in it, in that they shut off the streets, so it makes it very safe.
Yeah.
And
it's really another way of
it's a neighborhood experience.
It is, and I think that people have come together to appreciate the fact that not only what we do, but the involvement of the museum in the city and the activities. It all kind of connects, and that's another goal of ours too, is to maintain those relationships with other nonprofits. And so we've worked with the Pleasanton Art League. We're involved with them, and they have activities here at the museum. So it brings people into the facility, and it also gives them an opportunity to share it with their families and friends when we have exhibits here, and then they come back for other events too. So that's what makes it really great. But so we're pleased, and we still have our list of things to do, and that's good. Because I mean we're really temporary caretakers. If you think of the old caretaker, used to take care of the old family mansions. We are the caretakers of the homes that we have, and those will be passed on. And we want to make sure that they continue to be here so that we don't have to come back and haunt them.
Yes, that's true. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add? And I am going to have you in for another visit with Peter McDonald so that we can talk about the Gene Jones thing, because that was a unique part of, but also you were concerned about her, but you were also concerned about her home because it was a heritage home.
It was, and it could easily have gone,
it could easily have gone.
Yeah, for sure.
And
because it needed
we installed a
lots of
plaque on that home about three or 4 years ago.
Yeah, we did. So,
and it's actually a little bit. It's one home removed from the. I believe the boundaries are the same as the downtown specific plan boundaries for the heritage neighborhoods. It's not a district as yet, but one thing we would like to do is get an historic Pleasanton historic district, so it has some more legal protections, based on the law. Because if you're designated a district, an historic district, then you have more protections based on state and even federal law, I think.
well, in terms of who can come in and build and make a decision, and right now there's a lot of controversy about placing affordable housing in cities close to transportation and infrastructure, and it makes sense. Unfortunately, some of the developers who come from the outside who want to do this don't have a sense of the community or the architecture or the historic look, and so they tend to want to plop, a 5-story building right next to, a home that is an historic home. So that's something that, looking, as Brian said, at the historic district element, could afford us some more protection.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming. Yes, it was very interesting, and so glad to have the Pleasanton Heritage Association involved in our community. So
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Rebecca. Truly appreciate it.